I'm Craven from Kingdom of Vale.
So basically, this class was about managing range, uh, tension, and so forth. There's a couple of factors in a fight, right? You have this pass, and we're talking individual one-on-one combat, right? And you engage in a couple of different things that happen, and a lot of times it's we become used to doing something and then learning a reaction from it, right? And then we process that, we record it in our heads, and that's like like I talked about earlier, where you fight your friends, you get used to fighting your friends, so you do better and better and better with your friends because your computer database, your battle computer is recording this information and saving it, and it helps you make better decisions each time you negotiate a pass with them, right? But when you get in a broader spectrum of fighting, and you're fighting a lot more people that are different skill levels, and you get into higher skill levels and in different locations because their experience and how they do things might be different, right? So based off of that information, you need to have a tool to help you train to fight anybody anywhere and building blocks for that. Because if you don't teach yourself how to fight Gary, because Gary is not all over the world. There's Gary, Bob Jones, Georges, and crazy guys at other places that are really good, and you have to be able to adapt to perform better and change in your fighting, and that's only based off of the tools that you collect in your toolbox. So what I'm going to kind of go over a little more is, I call it fighting, a fighting formula, and it's like, all right, it's math, great. But it's really more of to organize some thought process and to help work with your training while you do your activities to better yourself, right? There are 4 factors for improving your probabilities of successful pass, right? Because there's no way to dictate the outcome of your fight other than trying to perform your best is the only thing that you're trying to achieve. And if your best is better than the other guy, then you achieved success, hopefully. Because you can have a great pass, do everything right, and lose a fight because they hit you and you missed a block. But doesn't mean you fought terrible. It just means he got an opportunity that you missed the block on. And if there's any way to die in a fight, that's probably the best way, to where you're like, hey, you know what? That was a good fight. You walk away satiated from all your work and effort, not just standing there and getting plinked away and hit. So we get the range, position, pressure, and timing, and tempo. With these things together, and when you build those tools and work, and all of them have a relationship that is strong together, you're going to increase your success. I don't think probabilities is a factor involved there, because that's just how you think, and every situation is going to be different. But the better you get at processing probabilities while you're fighting will increase your opportunity to be successful. Especially, fighters have been fighting for a couple of years, and their feet are wet, they've been involved, they're learning stuff. When we talk about probabilities, we're looking at target zones. I divided this opponent up in half and in little 6 quadrants of target zone, and I have to think about probabilities and my relationship to the targets. If I step over to this side of my opponent, I'm further away from this side of the target, right? So if I decide to throw an offside or an offside leg, being a lefty, if I was a right-hander, it's like you're throwing a shot. Whatever shot, you're further away from the target. So your percentage of chance is going to change with that. It's just variant to whatever, your opponent really leaves blatantly open or not. So with that in mind, it's a lower probability shot versus a higher probability over on this side of the body. So, and that reaches to that point of, hey, if I'm going to fire at shots over on the right side of my opponent, I should probably break the center line and be on the right side of my opponent. And if I want to throw shots at his left side of his body, I should be on the left side of his body. And that's really boils down to. But, you look at those probabilities, because you want to go to the highest probability shot. You're throwing it in a zone. When we get to C range, like we discussed in the range class, that makes a factor on what targets are available to you. So that's why we look at range as a factor, your position in relationship to your target, and then, timing and tempo are two things that are involved here too. Timing is knowing when to throw and when not to throw, and that's how it factors and you get from your probabilities. Everybody that's been fighting for a while, they hear about timing. They all know what timing means. It's the, when you throw your shot versus, and missing that opportunity. And that's usually what teaches you that your timing is off, is when you're like, shoot, I could have hit that target and I was thinking of throwing the shot and I missed my opportunity, my timing. And how to improve timing is the thing that you should be practicing, and that's with your eyes, right? But that timing is a huge factor. But you also got to add in tempo, the rhythm, the speeding up and the slowing down of your fight. And then how does that pressure part of the equation come into play? Because like pressure / tension, depends on, everybody there's a couple little different definitions of it. And to me, when I'm applying pressure, I'm giving my opponent an action that looks like it's aggressive, trying to get his attention to deal with that. So like closing into an opponent, walking just right at him is pressure. It's just, you're giving pressure straight onto your target, right? And how they react to it. Your opponent is, coming at you and you relieve the pressure by rotating out and doing a lateral step out of the way. You're releasing pressure off of your opponent from you while he's trying to apply it to you. So, there's a positive and negative to that. And I think it's an important factor to remember. Like another example of pressure is a fake. That's probably one of the more common things because, that second your fighter comes out and you're trying to teach him a little bit and you're trying to get him to have some kind of level of success and they're like, well, I lead with the flat snap because that leads to the offside all the time, or vice versa, because they get in this condition of a 1-2 thing that helps them get engaged into the fight a lot. And so you're like, well, hey, why don't you just throw a fake, do a little balk with your, throw a half of flat snap and pull it back and then change the shot to whatever opens up. So that's pressure. Now, how you apply pressure at different places is the key thing when you're involved. It's like the flat snaps that we talked about in range. When you practice throwing flat snaps at a Pell that doesn't move, you have to practice throwing a shot from C, B, and A range because your sword's hitting the Pell differently. The body mechanics are different for each of those shots based off those ranges. So if you really want to practice a flat snap, you're going to do more than just standing at B range, throwing it at the side of the Pell, thinking you're hitting the side of somebody's head. Pressure is the same way. The outside movement out on that outside C range, you're barely into threat engagement with your opponent, or you are just at the edge of it to where you can hit the front of the target. The pressure you have is different for the fact that, hey, you're less of a threat farther away from them. They can see everything that you do. So, how you manipulate those pieces to it makes the difference. It's to where, an exaggerated motion outside the range may not be as much of a threat possibly. It depends on the fighter you're with, but there's some factors involved there, because they can see your whole body. So your position change, your feet change can be intentional to be a pressure tension maneuver on them. In the movement of your hand from your guard to where you're like a high guard to an A-frame or whatever, however you do those changes, those threats are very visual and they work really well at C range, to where if you're really close and you sit there like, yeah, I'm in this guard and this guard, that guy just doesn't know if you're throwing a leg shot, an offside or a wrap or whatever. The urgency is different because of what he can see. And so when you're dealing with tension and pressure, you have to sit there and think, what range are you applying it? And that's the range that you need to work at with those techniques. So it's putting it in those buckets so that, so you can work on that factor by building pressure for the right appropriate time and place. So when you start training, you start out that Pell, or when we get back to fighting and you're fighting somebody, start putting some effort into tension and pressure a little bit. It's a great tool. This is the tool that makes a difference from the guy that just got knighted to the guy that's won more than one crown. Being able to use pressure, position, and range is a huge factor to those people. Applying all these things, yeah, there's people that got lucky. There's people that, have some, great physical ability. But bottom line is, in the long run, the majority of people did work and effort and time and sacrifice and worked on these things to make themselves better. That's really the truth of it. They're not the average is not the outlier. So on position, that relationship of yourself and to your target zone. Position means, like what we discussed earlier, it's that left and right of your opponent. Where are you at in relationship to your target? What are your probabilities of hitting him with a wrap from there to one side of his body to the other? Can't really go into much in position other than gaining position is the toughest part. And I think that's the part probably most of everybody in this room will relate to is, how do you get to there? It's not like I can just walk over to the corner of somebody without them moving. They got feet and they don't want to get hit either. I mean, this is why this builds up off of range. It's managing range. Your position changes at B and C. Those are the bigger places where you have to make those decisions. And that's where practice and building the battle computer are the most important part. Is understanding those things. And it's, and it's hard to get position. And it's going to be different for everybody for different abilities. Like, we got Osric in here. And Osric's a really tall guy. So him taking a normal step versus me taking a normal step, he's like a step. I'm a step and a half to his one step. And he steps to my shoulder. It's a huge difference. So it's going to vary by the individual and how successfully it's going to work. Those of us that are small, short people, we have to do a little extra work. And don't tell the tall people that because they'll take advantage of us. But we're harder working fighters. You can tell them that part. But really, though, us gaining that position. And that's why, like, a lot more often, we're deeper in a B range when we're trying to get a position change. And somebody asked earlier in the class, like, how do you negate the longer range guys? And it's like, you have to come in, with your defense. You have to close. There's no choice about it. You got to be close enough to hit the guy. And the one thing that amazes me when I talk about that is, it seems like such a giant mountain to close on somebody big like Osric or His Majesty Morgan. They're huge guys. They can manipulate, and, they can grab me with their shield and probably toss me out of the air. But the thing is, I go in a melee and I got a 9-foot spear, no shield, and I got 10 guys in front of me, and I'm just fighting like I don't give a shit, because I'm not worried. I don't think about it. And I have the possibility of 3 different people throwing at me at any time, and anytime I throw a shot, I'm at a high liability, right? But I don't sit there thinking of that as a mountain, but I get in front of a big guy, and now he's a mountain. This is one person that I have to focus on, not 10 across from me in a melee. And that's the perspective you have to get back into your head going, hey, this is one person I have to negotiate. We're both focused on each other, and I have to trust my defense. It's just like any fighting in melees where you're like, everybody's like, go forward, go forward, go forward. And they're telling you to take one step. You put up your block and you go forward. And with somebody you're fighting one-on-one, you do the same thing. My foster knight was 5 foot tall, Viscount Sir Eldred. And, I learned a lot of watching somebody close in on people and not have fear, and actually the bigger the people were, the more happy it was to fight them because he could hide behind, in front of their shield in front of them because he could just duck and disappear. And then they have to look for him and he knows where they're at because they're so damn big. But that closing and changing on that range and getting that position you need, the shorter you are, the closer you're going to have to be, and you need to build those tools for that and figure out what works best for you. And that's where that pressure and tension become a factor to you because it helps build opportunities and windows, the windows of opportunity, right? And that's what feeds the timing of things. And it also has that relationship to tempo. Right. And so tempo, I picked up more from Rapier because we always used to talk, guys are like, all right, you have to lead the dance. That's what we tell guys, you're out there fighting. It's like, well, what do I got to do? You got to lead the dance. It's like, how do I lead the dance? You have to take control of the fight. And how do you take control of the fight? Well, when you're fighting a good guy, how do you take control of the fight? That's not an easy question to answer. It's easy for the armchair quarterback over the side of the field drinking water, watching you sweat and trying to go fight, Duke Branos or Al-Anon, going, hey, go control the fight against that guy. You know what I mean? It's like you have to but you have to build up those pieces, because these are the tools that you do to change that. You start figuring out, what is the tempo and rhythm of the fight? How does that person want to fight? You start watching people and how they fight. Like me, my tempo is a pretty good little, fast beat, right? But what I end up learning to do is, we're going to go move a lot, put a lot of pressure on a guy and go, and just stop. And awkward pauses are like conversations. We're sitting there talking, and you ever have that moment, it just goes quiet. Nobody's saying anything. And someone is like, I got to break the silence. What do I say? Awkward silence. And then it happens, right? So in fighting, it happens the same way. You have to sit there and figure out what interrupts the tempo. Because a lot of times what guys will do, and you watch the better fighters, they slow down. It's patience, right? And it's like they're controlling the tempo by slowing it down, by not reacting to you going really fast. So you start lulling yourself into that psychologically, like, okay, we need to get in this groove. We're communicating to each other through physical and visual communication right now. And so you have to figure out, how do I change that tempo? And it's going to be different for everybody. Like I said, we're all different shapes and sizes, and we all have different attributes we bring to it, right? It's like, if I was a bigger guy, I would probably use more threat pressure to change the tempo, to speed guys up, but that's like, I guess, an example for a tempo change right there. Another one is, you kind of go, you push in and out on them. You push over on a corner a lot more, and you start getting the tension up, and like if you think about it, if you're engaging with somebody at outside range, and you're really tense, they're going to read that, right? Because, everybody can see that, so you're putting a theme out there in that body language to add tension. Now, when you fight that guy that's sitting over there and he's like, hey, how's it going? You ready? That's the oldest night trick ever, was like, you ready? Bang! It's like, you're like, all right, that'll never happen again. But it's that change that tempo. I mean, it's a good example of that tempo change. So you need to figure out the tools that work best for you on that tempo. The way I navigate it a lot of times is, if I got a taller opponent and I don't want to chase him, because I know chasing, I'm fighting on my knees, and and after a while it gets tiring running around on your knees too. The only good thing is you don't have a leg to hit, right? But the thing is, I have to sit there and put pressure on him and change the tempo, and I have to take the fight away from him, and the tempo, it's like, all right, I'm going to draw back, I'm going to go relax, and then I'm going to go hard as soon as he feels comfortable. Because you can watch his body language, right? We're having this conversation, he's all, oh, you backed off, I'm going to go up there, and then you're like, and you just go high, hot, and tight, and they see that, and then you just take him back down, relax a little bit, go back up again, back down. You start doing stuff like that. You start figuring out how tempo works, how fast you move on that outer circle. So let's say you're trying to rotate your opponent. You're standing on the C-range circle, and you start going around over to the left. You go over to the right. How fast you go is adding to that tempo change and whatever you're going to do. So if I want to sit there and I got a guy that's a super fast fighter, right, I'll go push over and I'll stay on the outside circle, right, and I'm walking on that line, and I'm going to go hard to the right as fast as I can. Well, not as fast, but walking fast. And then when I come back over to the left, since I'm left-handed, I'll slow down a little bit, because he's trying to figure out, what am I doing? And he's trying to start addressing, because I become this up and down variable to where he wants, both of us want this flat line. But the thing is, we want it to be our flat line. That's the tempo. So that's some food for thought there. And then let's talk about timing a little bit. Timing is one of the hardest things to train, because you're reacting, and the big thing with hard suit fighting, and even rapier too, knowing when to throw, and knowing when to hold them. Kenny Rogers, bless his soul. But you have to develop that timing, and the only way you can develop timing is keeping track of how you're training and doing the shot. So what I would do to work on a shot is, is I had an idea. I was like, hey, I think I'm going to try this, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this duck thing, and I'm going to, because I see this flat snap on a guy's leg because I'm left-handed, so it's wide open, and ducking is so bizarre at this moment. Well, I'm going to go to practice, and I'm going to go find the first year, 2-year fighters, the lower level fighters, right? And I'm going to go do something, and I'm not looking about did I hit him in the leg or not, because that's where we start. Our mind goes is like, what's the successful hard point that I can put a checkbox saying I hit 5 guys in the leg tonight? That means this works. You're looking for this validity in our minds, right? But what I am doing is I'm sitting there trying to tell myself, all right, as soon as I duck and I start to prime to throw the shot, what does that guy do? Does he flinch? Does he step out? Does he step to the right? Does he throw a shot? And I'll sit there and I'll record this data after a couple. Then I go, hey, I should go to the mid-level guys and try this out, because mid-level guys are faster than the new guy. They have a little more skill set on where they're managing their range. They don't, they don't fall for stupid stuff, So I'm just basically making it tighter in the control group that I'm working with. So I'll go out there and I'll do that with them, and I'll record the results of my battle, my mind, and figure out, okay, what are they? And then it's like, all right, well, first level guys prove that it's a possible. Mid-level guys prove that there's some meat to this object of, yeah, what you're thinking is possible to do and can work. And this is the reactions you're getting. And then you go fight the faster guys, the good guys, and because they're the guys that don't fall for fakes, and they don't fall for tricks as often, right? So they're, so you have to really manipulate tempo, pressure, range, and everything else to get something to work with them, And so it's like, all right, I'm going to go there and I'm going to do it with these guys, and I'm going to record those results. What do they do? What happened when this happened, and so forth. Then I look for the commonality, because the commonality between all those people is the thing that tells me more than likely this is the highest probable response I'm going to get from an individual. And when you cross sample that way, it's just, it's just statistics, right? It's like you have the idea of, oh, okay, this is more than likely what happens. Well, where are we at when I'm at this range and when I'm in this position? Is the leg really even open? Is that target zone even? Is he blocking that target zone? What target is open? Well, maybe I need to adjust my shot and my idea and my plan to something different and go to a different target. And how do I get to that target? From this position. Well, if I rise up, he's going to rise up. Well, let's go back to the lab, find out. And you're basically, you're collecting this data like a scientist, but you're being a social engineer. And I think, the better you get at those two skill sets, the faster you get at making decisions based off your training. You build up your database. I hope that part makes sense. When you add all these pieces together and you break up your training, and you're like, when you get done, like you go to practice, you have your plan, it's like we're not athletes in the aspect of we don't get paid to do this on a regular basis. We really don't do extra exercise during the week to make sure we're in physical shape. But we do go to practice. So that still makes us an athlete, and it requires some athletic ability, and there's some competitiveness involved here. You need to plan your practice. You go to practice, you have an idea. Everybody wants to go to practice and have some fights. It's like, so what I do is I try to do multiple passes with people, and I try to make, the learning passes to work on my training. And then I do the, hey, let's just freaking fight and get some fights and get that energy and blow that wad out. And then and then the friends that you fight on a regular basis that are the good guys, you're like, they're the ones you're like, all right, we're just going to go beat the hell out of each other, and this is going to be good, and I'm going to go home, and my brain just dumped out, and I can go back to work and not hate people. But, so those are the pieces that you got to kind of add together and work. And so when you're at practice, you work, you can't just work on range alone other than to understand range, but you got to work on position with it. And I guess that's why I call it math, because it's the easiest way the easiest language to spell it out at. You can't do timing unless you're doing fighting, because the Pell has the worst timing out of all the fighters around, because they just stand there and they just take it. It's like, oh yeah, it's like Rocky, but they don't come out. They don't have a comeback. And it's like, the best you got. That's the best you got. That's the best you got. Oh, okay, we're done. It's very easy and susceptible to fall to, hey, I'm going to do this one thing more, and you get over focused into it, forgetting that there's a whole equation involved here. So make sure you balance it out. You have to moderate yourself and control yourself. Because we fall victim while training to, oh wow, that really worked. I'm going to go kill that dead horse and beat it to death until there's blood all over the place, and this horse is just part of the ground, because it's like, I won something, I got something. We get excited, we can't help it, we just want that success. But you have to have the discipline to go, hey, I need to keep a balance and make this better for myself and move on. Drills and Pels for position. When you're at the Pel, think about the range you are to it. Think of this type of shot you're throwing. Then change your position. It's like a footwork drill where, your partner will call out a shot, right? And, so if they're smart, they'll go, hey, it's like flat snap, you throw a flat snap, and then they call off leg. You got to rotate over and you got to step over to break the center line to go throw the off leg. Now you move to your right, like in my case, I moved to the right, you move to your left. Being righties, you move to your left, and then they call another shot. And what they're trying to do is get you to move around the Pel and change your position with your Pel. Right? And you can do that at B and C range a little bit, and practice throwing it. Some other drills, for, like the pressure, that's all human. One thing you can do with timing actually on the Pel, I would sit there with throwing offsides, and I had a cue ball size dot on the Pel, right? And I have, a line at the top of the cue ball, a line at the bottom, and a line in the middle. And I took this from playing pool, because when you sit there and you want to draw on the cue ball, you stroke the cue stick to where it hits the center and pushes to the bottom, and the cue ball draws backwards, right? And if you want the cue ball to go really far, you hit the top of it. So I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. It's like, I should try doing that fighting. And you're like, well, you don't draw a ball and you don't push a ball very far. But the one thing is, you practice at pool doing that. And that's the thing. And it's these micro adjustments on this cue ball because it's so small. So you're hitting the top of the diamond, the bottom of the diamond, cue ball. That's how pool players practice with hitting the cue ball to do the magic they wanted to do. So I went to the Pel and I'm like, all right, I'm going to work on hitting to the top of the Pel and that top of that cue ball, the bottom of that cue ball, and the middle of that cue ball. That's an inch adjustment each time. Go out and fight a guy. He has a triangle in front of his face. I just have to figure out, do I go below the cue ball, to the center of the cue ball, or to the top of the cue ball to hit him in the face with the tip of my sword? So I'm just teaching him about. Now, the timing. This is the part where you can practice timing. Well, you think about it. You're hitting the Pel and you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 4. You change that pace of how often you hit it after you practice hitting the target a little bit, because we get used to hitting the Pel and we're going boom, 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 or doing a 2-shot combo, flat snap, offside leg, wrap to the head, offside to the face. You're going continually the whole time, right? Well, you can throw a pause in there and take a step and practice slowing down your motion, and then go out to a human person that can hit you back and move with you and read off of what you're doing and practice that timing off of that to see how the window works and how a pause changes it, how speeding up the shot, going from a lazy leg shot to a fast arm wrap, that tempo change is huge right there. So those are some of the key things there with that. I haven't given this class before until today on like putting all these pieces together, of giving components of it. So hopefully I got the concept to you of putting these things in a bucket, some ideas of, work them into your training and practice, because that's what you should be doing, and looking at the effects with it, and then using it for your drills and your Pels. If you do the Pel, I only do the Pel for working out theory, and then I go find human beings because I think human beings are a better piece to work with. You're unique, you're different. You need to figure out what works for you and what's best for you and try things.